Who is that one stranger that you never forgot? A woman outside the grocery store looking distressed and hopeless. I was only there to pick up one thing I needed for a recipe, a sauce or seasoning or something. It's been a while. She was standing outside groceries in hand desperately trying to ask people for help. I'm a naturally paranoid person, and when she came up to me that paranoia immediately struck. Initially I was going to just make an excuse to get myself out of social interaction, but for some reason I stopped and listened to what she was asking. She was desperately trying to borrow someone's phone to call her sister who was supposed to be there to pick her up as she didn't have a car. Understandably, being alone outside a grocery store in the middle of nowhere with arms loaded with food that will spoil soon can be a bit of a modern day horror story. When she asked me if she could borrow my phone, I was, again, paranoid as all heck, but I pushed that down and ended up calling her sister for her, just to confirm it was a real number and let her leave a message. Even though her sister didn't pick up, the look of relief on her face was wonderful. She thanked me and I went into the store to get my chipotle mayo or whatever the heck I was there for that day, and by the time I left the store she was gone. Probably never going to forget her, simply because I know how it feels to be in that situation where things aren't going as they should and everything just seems like it's catastrophically crashing down around you. This might get buried in this post, but the one I'll always remember is this tiny old Scottish lady. One night, I live in the south end of Scotland but my family is English. I get a phone call telling me to get back now cause my mum could die any second. I rush to the station and jump on the first train, bawling my eyes out. Everyone does me the courtesy of politely pretending that I am not openly sobbing. Besides this one tiny old lady who plonks down right next to me, hands me a bag of Maltesers aka little chocolates, and goes, "What's up chick?" and I just break down crying on this random old woman's shoulder while she pulls more and more chocolate out of some magical part of her coat, and by the time we get to her stop she gives me a hug and goes, "Ah," and it all works out in the end, even if it feels like it's going to crap at first, and wandered off. A guy, maybe 13, 14, around my age at the time, that helped me and my father navigate the Szczecin tram system, Poland. He spoke German to us and gave us his map. I tried to find him later on. He actually got off the stop we wanted to get off to, but we accidentally stayed on the tram. He was so nice. I held a door open for an elderly lady who then wished me a great day and commented that I was brought up well. Lady, you have no idea what I get up to when I'm not holding open doors for the likes of you. When I was 14 or so, I held the door open for an elderly couple. Instead of thanking or acknowledging me, they just said to each other, "OHH, there's still a few left," back and forth a few times. Little did they know I was high as frick. After visiting the Louvre about 10 years ago, Mum and I were taking the metro back toward our hotel. A man got on holding a little boy that looked like he escaped from one of the Renaissance paintings. He had beautiful golden curls and big blue eyes. He looked like a doll, not real. Hope that adorable kiddo is doing well. Thanks for that beautiful story, old French whore. I was in Portland, Oregon to visit my dad for Thanksgiving and was walking down the street with him. This lady sneaks up on me and pats my head saying there are women who would kill for that hair. I'm a dude, and then she just walks off. Dude, I used to have naturally blonde, straight hair, like 18 inches long, and got a lot of those same reactions in college. I was in Seoul, South Korea working on an assignment and didn't know the language. It was a year of unprecedented floods, and during one of the worst ones, I stupidly decided to still get to the subway and get to work. Water was up to my waist. Picture a guy wading in water while holding up an umbrella to protect his face for some reason. And at some point I cut my hand on something in the water. By the time I reached the subway, I was bleeding all over a wet handkerchief I had. A girl sat next to me and started pointing at my hand, saying what must have been concerned things in Korean. I was replying in English, "Yeah, I'm an idiot." She opens up her bag, takes out band-aids and fixes up my hand. It was the nicest thing a stranger has ever done for me and I'll never forget it. Was having a really horrible day on my way to work, and at this point it had crushed my soul and I was definitely questioning whether or not I should have thrown myself in front of a train. I wasn't crying. I wasn't outwardly upset at all. I was begging for something to make it worth it. Anything. In my head just repeating freaking Christ please help me. Out of nowhere a normal, everyday guy came up to me and sat next to me. He asked me how I was. I said I was good, etc. And then he said, God has a plan for you. You don't have to believe in this kind of stuff. But your life is worth it, and there are good things in your future. Keep going. Have a wonderful day. And then he left, and then I started crying. By no means religious at all, but I'll never forget it. It's like he knew. It keeps me going sometimes. When I was little I was scared of escalators. My mum went down without me and I just stood at the top crying until a man held my hand and took me down the escalator to her. Will always remember my hero. Once got my shoelace stuck in an escalator as a kid. Walking behind my mother at a train station and am suddenly pulled back. Cry in horror as I watch my parents try to board a train while I am pulled into the depths of escalator heck. Eventually shoelace breaks and I sprint into the train. Don't frick with escalators. I've told this story before, but this is definitely someone I have never forgotten. When I was a kid we didn't have a lot of money, so we often shopped at thrift stores. What I loved about that was that you could get 10 books for $1, so I would plant myself in front of the book section and make piles of which one I wanted to get and then decided after I'd gone through them all. One day an older lady saw me sitting with my piles and asked if I liked to read. I told her I did and showed her a few of the books I found that I liked. She smiled and then pulled $1 out of her purse, handed it to me and said, "Promise me that you'll keep reading." I was so happy and immediately stood up and said that I would. She smiled and walked away and I went back to my piles able to pick out an extra 10 books to take home. It was just a small act of kindness for her, but for me having a random stranger encourage my love of reading and making me promise to never stop definitely had a lot to do with my continued love of reading. This was over 20 years or so ago, but I still think of her whenever I buy a new book. This one is my favorite. The young woman with disturbingly tiny hands, sitting outside of a club in downtown Portland, or, about 15 years ago, she aggressively hit on me for a few minutes. I'm also woman, until I awkwardly blurted out that I wasn't interested, at which point she called me a baby machine and left. Good times. Portland is freaking weird. Saw a male clown in white and pink clown getup pushing a baby stroller with a boombox in it. Can't even recall what song was playing, probably because I was a bit distracted. When I was 16 I was wearing shorts and at the time I was extremely uncomfortable with showing my legs. I was making comments to a friend about how uncomfortable I was when a woman in a wheelchair was going past me and overheard what I was saying, and she is the only random stranger to say anything to me that has really stuck with me. Wear those shorts and wear them proudly. It doesn't matter if you forgot to shave your legs, have varicose veins, cellulite, stretch marks, they are pale or whatever reason you're shy about your legs. You're not guaranteed that you'll be able to walk on them tomorrow. As soon as she said that she kept going. It stuck with me. Even 10 years later, I now love wearing shorts, skirts and dresses. A very touching life lesson. I was at a festival. Random dude came up, handed me his phone and asked me to film him for a bit. He started by saying, "Brother, this one is for you." I figured his brother couldn't make it. Then he pulls out a vial and dances around with it, the contents going everywhere. Turns out that was his brother flying everywhere. When I was 15 I had to take a 3-day Greyhound bus trip by myself. Kinda sketchy for a 15-year-old girl traveling alone. Up till that point my interactions with guys were mostly of the creeper immature boy variety of just trying to get a grip of my early maturing curves. I ended up sitting next to this dude. He was cute and probably 4 or 5 years older than me. We chatted a bit, but nothing too much. It was overnight ride and late. I fell asleep on his shoulder, woke up with his arm around me, stayed like that for a few hours just watching the road go by. He never once did or said anything inappropriate. When he got off the bus and said goodbye I was seriously sad. He made 15-year-old me a little less jaded and believe that good guys actually existed. Bonus. He accidentally left his sweatshirt behind. I kept that for years. My wife bought me tickets to a Red Sox game for our 5th anniversary. It was a 7 PM game, so we did the normal tourist crap. Quincy Market, Freedom Trail, etc. We hop over to the T to head to Fenway and we can't figure out which car we're supposed to take. Across the way this tall, older brother nods to my wife and I, walks over and says, "You want this one, my man? Fenway is this way, I'll walk with you." This sounds immediately like, "You're gonna get mugged," but I didn't have any of those biochemical red flags going off in my head, so we tagged along. We chatted on the way to our stop, in a car packed with people, and when we got off, this dude walked with us to Fenway to make sure we made it. On the way over this dude decided to freestyle rap, only he implemented my wife's name, my name, our anniversary, the Red Sox trip, where we were from, etc. It was unfreaking believable. 5 minutes of freestyling about crap he learned from us simply through conversation. I didn't have cash, otherwise I would have given him $10 or something, but when we were done he told us, "Look, after the game, do not walk back through this park. Take a cab right from the stadium. Pay extra, wait longer, whatever, but do not come into this park." Don't remember the dude's name, but he entertained us and then gave us some sincere advice. I'll never forget him. Whoa, he sounds like a psychic, or someone with awesome observation skills. A homeless man at the community soup kitchen who wished me a Merry Christmas with tears in his eyes as he was fed his hot lunch. When I was in high school, some friends and I had a tradition of feeding the homeless on Christmas. As the volunteers would walk into the church, all the people in line for their meals would cheer, thank them, etc. The genuine gratitude was the best feeling ever. It's so rewarding to do nice things. One time, when I was out in the city with my family, we passed a very frail elderly man in the park. He was walking with great difficulty, using a cane to keep him upright as he struggled with each step. As we passed by him, my cousin looked back at the man. They made eye contact. Suddenly, the man perked up and did a little jig dance, waving his cane around in the air. He winked at her and then resumed his initial position. She was the only one who saw him. First job, had just broken up with my first love and I was super depressed. Guess you could see it in my face cause some guy driving by said cheer up and gave me a thumbs up. It was like some Rasta kinda guy, dreads and all. It was 7 AM. I was waiting for the bus. It did cheer me up. Maybe 7 years ago, this teenage girl followed me around a mall for about a half hour. I was probably 16 at the time. We eventually made eye contact, and she came up and really excitedly told me that I looked exactly like a character in some novel she was writing, right down to my clothes and everything. My knee jerk was to be weirded out and politely bow out of the situation, but dang it if I don't wish I'd stuck around and asked her what the character's name was. It was probably I Collect Straws. I was waiting for a train and this homeless or crazy dude walks up to me and said, "Yo, gonna be a millionaire one day," and walked away. I was sitting in a sports bar in downtown Boston with my best friend about 20 years ago. I suddenly felt a strong sense of being watched. I looked up, and what appeared to be a homeless man was standing across the street from the bar, staring at me through the windows. It sounds creepy, but for some reason I wasn't scared of him at all, and we locked eyes. He started walking towards the bar and we kind of stayed staring at each other. We kept our gaze as he walked into the bar and walked right up to me. My friend was kinda like, "You know this guy?" He didn't say a word. He just put his palm out and I instinctively put my palm on his. He ran his pointer finger up and down my palm and looked at it intently. He finally spoke and said, "You have a lot of anxiety about your future, but it's going to be alright. You won't be rich, but you'll be comfortable. You're going to have 2 kids and you won't be in Boston, but you'll still be close enough to your family. I know that's important to you. You're going to have a good life." Then he gently closed my hand, gave it a genuine squeeze, and walked out. 20 years later, I moved to NJ from Boston, have a husband and 2 kids, and I'm not rich, but comfortable. I was such a strange experience, but there was a peace that came over me when he spoke to me. For some reason, I believed him. I'm not sure if I subconsciously made what he said happen, but it was a weird, yet comforting experience. TLDR. Strange homeless man randomly read my palm 20 years ago and he was right. My mom and I were in Paris. We're American. The line for the towers of Notre Dame was multiple hours long, but we knew we'd never pass that way again, so we waited. In front of us were 2 German women. We couldn't talk to each other, language barrier, but we shared smiles, snacks, our umbrellas when it started to rain, etc. Next day, who do we bump into at the Louvre? The same two German ladies. We ended up eating together at the cafe. 4 tourists having a conversation that consisted entirely of smiles. For the category of friendliest strangers, they are tied with the Jordanian taxi driver who went in with me after driving me to the hospital for dehydration during my semester abroad. But Spanish speaking man who couldn't give me directions. So he led my car to the highway with it at 2 AM in Union City. NJ and Armani ladies who gave us a ride to our destination in Sur are both close seconds. I might rely a bit heavily on the kindness of strangers. Walking down the street in my neighborhood sometime in the first year I lived in NYC, a guy I was passing hit me with a very polite "excuse me mom," and then once he had a sliver of my attention followed it up with an emphatic "but you have a big butt." I never stopped walking where I was heading, but it was so unexpected that it made me laugh out loud, and I remember it 10 years later. Not one stranger but that couple I met when I first moved to Adelaide, Australia. We talked on bus because I was sitting next to them and I asked them about Adelaide public transport and stuff. I was supposed to get off by stop 21 but I didn't cause I was dumb. The couple was getting off at stop 21 too, and I reckon they reminded to get off there too, but I didn't catch what they were saying so I just sat. I got off by terminal stop 30 and had zero clue where to go next. I walked back along the street and saw a black SUV and the couple was in it and hailed and said I missed the stop. They picked me up and drove me to the place I wanted to go. It was about 4 years ago. God bless those two. Late to this thread but here it goes. 2 days before Christmas this year, I was on a flight home to see my family. I hate flying. I'm that person on flights who sweats profusely, dry heaves when there's turbulence, closes her eyes and grips the seat the entire flight, etc. It's miserable, but I have to do it to get home. The flight attendant was this older woman. She said she was 70, but there's no way. She couldn't have been older than 55. Her safety seat was directly beside my aisle seat. She talked to me the whole way. She comforted me, told me about her family, explained how she had been a flight attendant since 1961 and never almost died. I had to ask. She told me funny stories about her grandkids, and when turbulence would strike, she would start asking me questions about my family. Midway through the flight, I made a joke, about how she could be so sure her plane would never crash. She looked at me and said, "Honey, any plane that has me on it ain't about to crash. Cause I'm not about to go out that way. No mom, I'm gonna die laughing or die in my sleep." I have no idea why, but that was the most comforting humorous thing I'd ever heard. And she said it so matter-of-factly. I will always appreciate her kindness and understanding. I'm 26, but I look 16. She helped someone's terrified daughter survive another terrifying flight. I always wanted to be a writer, but never had much self-confidence in my story ideas. Once on a plane journey when I was around 19, I sat beside a girl from Australia around my own age and we got to talking. I confided my dreams and my fears, and she said, "Maybe your ideas only seem stale to you because you're so used to them. To someone else, they might seem fresh and amazing. Thanks, Australian girl whose name I don't know. Your words kept me going." My Reddit miracle guy. Several years ago, after I had recently gotten my Reddit account, I made a post in our MMFB about how hard of a year my family had. Brother had been on life support for 2 weeks recently, how broke all of us were, and how my parents couldn't even afford a Christmas tree that year. It was kind of a symbol for us that made us all very depressed. I barely had gas money to drive home from school. This guy sends me a PM and offers to give me money. I'm super skeptical but eventually give him my PayPal account, thinking that there was no way this was going to pan out. That night, he put almost $2,000 in my PayPal account. I couldn't believe it. I was able to pay for gas, presents, a tree, a Christmas feast, libations for my younger brother and I, who was also in college, and I gave my parents $400 for Christmas. I kept profusely thanking this guy and asking how I could repay his kindness. He eventually told me to stop messaging him and just pass on the favor when I had the chance to sometime in life. I fully intend to do just that. I was a rural firefighter EMT for a few years and responded to a very bad car wreck one Easter morning. It was a minivan with a mother and 2 kids on their way to church when they went off the road and flipped. We closed the road in order to manage the incident, call for a medical helicopter, etc. These were 2-lane rural country roads, so when we closed a road that messed up people's plans. Drivers would get snippy and blame us for making them late and having a longer drive. As I walked back to my fire truck to get more road flares, an older woman driving by herself asked me how much longer the road would be closed. I told her it was a really bad wreck and that she might want to turn around like the other cars were doing. I expected her to complain, but she instead said that she wanted to wait so she could pray for the people in the car. That older lady stayed in her car for an hour and prayed for people she didn't even know. I'm not particularly religious, but I'll never forget that woman and how much she genuinely seemed to care about people she didn't know. The man in the banana suit in the bathroom at Chick-fil-A and the black guy who asked me how big his dong was. There was a nice old man who was dragged into the home store I worked at by his wife. He was a vet, and the first time they came in, he saw the CB's belt buckle I got from my dad. He would always ask for me after that or about me if I wasn't there. He just wanted to chat while his wife shopped for new towels or curtains. He was so kind, and he always gave me a hug and a "you take care now" when they left. About 10 years ago, I was in my local pub with some friends and went up to the bar to get my round in. Got chatting to some guy who I'd seen in there before a few times but never actually spoken to. He was an older guy, probably close to 50. Not frail but not a large guy. I meanwhile was around 20 at the time. 5 feet 11 and weighed about 90 kilograms and was in pretty good shape as a keen sportsman. We had a pretty amicable conversation. I don't recall what about exactly, but it was just exchanging pleasantries and chatting about sport, etc. Just as I paid for my drinks, the guy looked me dead in the eye and told me, "You know, I'm going to kill you one day," completely straight-faced. I looked at him and asked him to repeat what he said, as I was sure I must have misheard him, only for him to state again that he would kill me one day. I laughed at him and said, "Alright mate, I guess I'll see you later then," and picked up my drinks and went back to my friends. I was physically much bigger than him and would have backed myself mano et mano. Plus I was with friends who would have had my back if he'd started any funny business. Nothing happened from then on, but I'm not going to lie, it did freak me out, especially as I lived practically next door to this pub at the time, so wouldn't have been hard for him to find. I still think about the encounter often. I presume he was just having fun trying to intimidate people, but frick, it was weird. I was playing in the sea at some French beach on holiday when my lips started turning blue because of the cold, so my dad sent me out of the water. However, he was still playing ball with my cousin, so he pointed me in the direction. To clarify, I was around 10, spoke only Dutch and very basic English. Of course I went way too far left beyond the spot my parents had set up their stuff and where my mom was sunbathing. So I walked along the beach trying to find them, to no avail. I end up asking random people if they had seen my mother or father, which is quite useless, firstly because 15 years ago French people weren't that familiar with English, and secondly because nobody knew my parents, of course. So I ended running into a man with his 2 sons who tried to help me find my parents. He took me into a higher vantage point in the dunes trying to spot my parents. Because I was still in swimwear, he lent me one of his son's shirts. He ended up recognizing the name of the camping we were staying and he drove me there. Some random French dude on holiday took the time and effort to safely return me to camping, and neither me or my parents were able to thank him because he left after I found my tent. The amount of things that could have gone wrong in this story still scare my mom, but because of this nice man everything ended up fine. Once when tripping on mushrooms, I walked through a cemetery and meet a guy who told me he was a ghost. I still don't know if he was a real ghost or even a real person, but I'll never forget. The young English lad at a bus stop in Norwich, UK. He was busy necking his girlfriend, rather passionately. A well-dressed blind woman with her cane came to the stop and said, "Would someone let me know which bus goes to the railway station please?" Everyone froze for a minute and stared. The lad disentangled himself from his girlfriend, went up to the lady, spoke to her, and guided her to the right bus and got her a seat in it and told the bus driver something and stepped back out. His GF buried her face into his chest as they leaned against the building wall quietly talking some stuff. Watching this that late wintry evening, waiting for my bus, it lifted my mood. Everyone around were the usual, pretending nothing ever happened there, including me, and each wordlessly fell in line for our respective buses and made our way home. This guy that pulled over, picked me up, and drove me to work when I was walking there in the rain. It blew my mind that someone could be that kind. No idea who he was. He just saw me walking in the rain and pulled over. Actually, this year I got to pay it back. I saw a cleaner walking from our office shack back to the main plant. It's not too far of a walk, but I noticed him hunched over, and he stopped a few times looking in pain. So I jumped in my car and drove up to him and offered him a lift back. He told me he injured his back at home and couldn't afford to take time off. He was really thankful and shook my hand before leaving the car, just like I did to the kind stranger who gave me a lift in the rain. Both are moments in life I'll never forget. When we came to the US with a green card program, we landed in Philly. I was sick after a long flight from Europe. Something happened to my ears during the flight so I couldn't hear a dang thing. And we were supposed to present all the immigration paperwork to be checked, be interviewed by the agent and see if we get approval. The lines were also terrible and we had a connecting flight to catch. I was really close to dying there. The agent who processed us was the nicest possible. I will always remember his name, Agent Willing. Thank you. After one of my son's surgeries, I went back to our motel for a cigarette and a shower. Outside there was this lady who was telling me all about this magical tape that she covers her entire body with to protect her from the hydro wires. We chatted for a while. She handed me a napkin with butterflies on it because she thought it was beautiful and she said something was telling her I needed it. It's been 5 years and I still have the napkin. When I was about 8, I went to a fair. I decided to go into the haunted house there without my parents. Halfway through I got panicky, unsure when if something would jump out at me. A nice man carrying a toddler happened by, saw how scared I was, and let me hang onto his shirt so I could follow with my eyes closed. Thanks, random man. I was traveling for work when my engine started giving me some trouble. It seemed like it was revving super high and no matter what I couldn't get my car over 40 miles per hour. I didn't get far, pulled over, and started to see smoke coming out of my engine. I shut it off, grabbed my bag and hopped out of the car, opened the passenger side doors and hatch. I don't know why I thought that would help if there was a fire, and popped the hood. I sat in the grass trying to think of my next move while it cooled, scared it would suddenly burst into flames when an old Chevy truck covered in bumper stickers pulled in front of me. Out hopped an old woman wearing a tie-dye t-shirt and a denim jacket and jeans, hair longer than you would expect from someone her age, and a cigarette in her mouth. She asked if I was okay and if I knew what was wrong. I told her I had no idea, but recounted exactly what had happened. She checked everything she possibly could for the next 20 minutes while telling me stories of how she was a mechanic decades ago before she had her daughters, that I looked just like her oldest daughter before she started having babies, and that girls should be taught more about cars because it's dangerous for a woman to be stranded, though it's dangerous for anyone and they're making cars harder to fix nowadays. She topped off some fluids from what I had in my hatch, then told me there was nothing wrong with the engine and it was safe, gave me directions to the closest good mechanic, and told me how exactly to drive it to avoid overheating just in case. I gave her a huge hug and she was very humble about it, hopped back in her truck and went on. I seriously thought she was going to some crazy woman and I was in trouble. She was so much smarter than my judgment based on her looks. I was mugged on the train home from college when I was 19. Beaten quite badly and stabbed twice. There were 2 guys on the train who, as luck would have it, were on their way home from a first aid training course and had received first aid kits as part of their training. They were able to use all their bandages etc to help stop the bleeding before I was taken off a few stops later and onto an ambulance. Never even got their names. F***ing legends. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.